There we are. Yeah.
So is that the lot? We done?
Yes, goodbye. Nice chatting to you.
So what's happening? Anything exciting?
No, I don't think so.
No.
It's very much, yeah. Yeah. Got my follow-up, or got an appointment in the hospital tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
How are you feeling about that?
Well, you know, they made me first go take a whole lot of blood tests, and it's all got to do with diseases of the blood, like cancer and other things that they're looking for. Okay. Based on why I got my blocked artery. So not sure about it, you know. We'll just see what it is and move from there. Okay. So ask me this time tomorrow. You know?
Sometimes I can't help but think that they just sort of like cast a net out there and just see what they catch, you know?
Yeah, this is a public hospital, so you know, it's not like it's your GP and that's looking for more incentives and so on. So it's I don't think it's necessarily about money. I think the public hospitals are under a bit of strain at the moment because they're understaffed and so yeah, but who knows? So how's your writing?
Yeah, just plodding along, you know.
No, I don't know.
You don't know? Well, it comes at the pace that it chooses to come at, and sometimes that's lots, and other times it's not much. But that's okay.
But that implies that you've actually started.
Oh yeah, I've definitely started. Yeah.
Oh, that's what I wanted to know. That's fun. Yeah.
No, definitely started. Yeah, I told you I started. Yeah.
Yes, I know, but I'm just checking up on you.
Yeah, no, definitely started.
Okay, that's great. All right. Yeah, so what are you blending?
Tonight it was carrots, celery, dark grapes, strawberries, blueberries, coconut yogurt, like non-dairy yogurt.
Yeah.
Water. I think that was about all on that one.
Okay. Yeah, I must try the well, I've got non-dairy yogurt. I've also got, you know, non-dairy milk that maybe also be an idea to try. I haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
Because I basically just use water, structured water, and then whatever else I throw in. Every day it's different. I'm getting quite clever with the blend of the taste now.
I definitely feel the benefit of it.
Yeah, I do too. Definitely.
Without a doubt, you know, I feel the system just seems to be a lot more energized as a result of it, you know.
Yeah, assuming that all other aspects are equal, like let's say on a particular night you sleep average, okay, which is well, then definitely I can now stay awake the whole day and night until I go to bed. But if I had a bad night's sleep, then I find nothing else, you know.
Yeah. It's interesting how your day unfolds sometimes like that, isn't it? You know?
It is totally in an unexpected way.
Yeah, I'm listening to this book at the moment by an American Buddhist talking about his times with his gay mentor.
Okay.
And into the monastery, and his dysfunctional family who were ultra conservative Catholic, conservatives. His father was a manufacturer of gun barrels.
Goodness. Okay.
So, but he mounts some interesting arguments. I mean, he talks a lot about trying to strike this balance about being fully alive. And by that, I'm not 100% sure, but I think he means just engaged with whatever you're engaged with, each day. But goes on to say that it doesn't seem to matter what it is you're engaged with, as long as you're engaged with it.
Yeah. Hell, I go along with that.
But then it also had me thinking at the same time, is like Adolf Hitler was pretty much engaged with what he was engaged with.
Yeah. But interesting that you bring that up, because of a concept or belief system that manifested around everybody with regards to Hitler. And I'm not saying that, but he was engaged, and he just was on the satanic side, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? And
doesn't mean that making gun barrels is on the satanic side.
Oh no, not at all. I mean, his view was, well, I suppose the thing that he struggled with as a Buddhist was, preservation of life. And he even has these musings through his book about, someone sent his father a picture of the soldiers standing over a dead terrorist in Iraq, with a gun with one of his gun barrels on it. But he said he also noticed, though, that the dead terrorist was wearing a suicide pack, like explosives.
Yeah.
And he was just musing about, well, how do you navigate your path through that? Like, is the death of that terrorist actually a good thing? Because if the terrorist had been successful in exploding the suicide pack, it could have killed a whole lot of people. One versus many, or those sorts of musings. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. The first thought that comes to my mind is, depending on your altitude, okay, you will never come into contact in an environment like that, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so your altitude takes you into that environment, and it has to be, because it's part of evolvement, okay? It's not about, is, the terrorist, and I should have killed him, I shouldn't have killed him, okay? That decision you have to make, okay, depending on your altitude, okay? And the bottom line is, you killed somebody, okay, that's fine, okay? But is it fine for your evolvement? And if you hadn't killed him, he supposedly would have killed somebody else, but you don't know that.
No, that's right. It's theoretical, isn't it?
It's theoretical, because yes, he had the bombs on him and attached to him and so on, but maybe that was all part of only exposed to you, of your resonating with that particular frequency. And So you are confronted with that choice. You shot him, okay? And you had an excuse to shoot him. So you had an excuse to take a life. So if that's where you're at, then that's where you're at. Is it good or bad? You know, who's it for you and I reading the book or you get exposed to something like that? You know, what does it mean to us? I mean,
doesn't mean a job to us because we weren't there.
Absolutely, absolutely nothing. And you know, so but we are where we are today, doing something, taking some action. Okay, like your author says, and in as long as we and this is what I agreed with, is because I read it in the book that the Plan of Life, and I shared it with you, and that is, you know, if one of the three things that make up, you know, fulfillment is just doing something that you enjoy doing. Okay, that's it. Okay, and then of course we already discussed the other two aspects, but that relates to what you're talking about now. What do you think of that? Okay.
No, I think it's absolutely the thing, because like one of the, you know, like thinking through like the discussions I've been listening to, it's easy to sort of slip into, you know, right, wrong thinking or even rebellious thinking, in the sense that, you know, like if, for example, in his case, like he was brought up as a very conservative, strict practicing Catholic. And so he had very specific views about what was right and what was wrong and what was moral and what was immoral and all of those things.
Yeah, yeah.
And the danger, the potential for him is for the pendulum to swing from one extreme to the other. And, you know, how does that enable you to experience life to the full if you're burdened by a narrow perspective?
Yeah, yeah. Again, it's the frequency, the altitude at that time.
And I think, you know, like part of the thought that I had was, well, it's very important just to be aware of where you're at any point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you were saying earlier in the conversation that doing what you're doing right at this moment, drinking the green juice or the smoothie, shall we say, has made you feel a lot better in this moment. Okay, and I agreed with you as too. One of the things that I used to do and then didn't do for, I guess, probably the past 2 years. Okay, you know, I used to read and enjoy reading science fiction. Okay, and then for 2 years I just couldn't. I had books I hadn't read lying around here, and then a week ago I just picked up a book and enjoyed it and was able to read it, and I put it down to the green juice, okay, the smoothie, and so I'm back to reading again. You know, wow, okay, and it may not have been the green juice. It doesn't matter. It's just what is right now. Okay, and that's what I'm focusing on. It's what clearly is a form of relaxation, and I don't know what else you want to call it, because I tend to only read sort of outside of the day. Yeah.
Because I think, you know, when I was sort of reflecting a little bit on the way this guy tells the story, and, you know, it's one of those, like when you listen to an audiobook, And if there are things about the person who, or they call it performing, the person who's like reading or performing the book, if there's things about them that you don't like or find annoying or whatever, it can be a bit distracting. And this guy, he has, you know, like he's like a New Yorker, so he's got that New Yorker accent,
right?
And he talks about, you know, when he's with his gay mentor in a gay bar that he calls the butt hut, you know. And I'm just like, oh, like enough with the pathetic humour. Like that's just,
Yeah.
You know, but when it's sort of, but notwithstanding that, I mean, but it also took me back to sort of say, well, or wonder, like people who practice a designated religion, irrespective of what it is, you know.
Yeah.
You know, part of the paradox, particularly like with the Zen Buddhists, is that, you know, he talks about, you know, it's not about freeing yourself from suffering necessarily, and it's not about getting comfortable, and it's not about, you know, all of these things. It's just about being awake to what is, you know, and to be alive to the life happening. But when you look at a lot of the tradition and the practices and so on that they perform, again, there's a fine line there that some people could just be addicted to this spiritual process in lieu of taking that little step further, you know, to not being, just seeing that as a means to an end rather than the ends.
Right.
You know, so it can be a slippery path that, you know, these so-called holy people, you know, like, are they engaged with life? Because the reality of life, as I look around, is, you know, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything in between. You know, so.
Yeah. But that's also your belief system.
Well, yeah, I guess so, because I guess I categorise things good, bad, or ugly, or in between too. No.
Yeah, and you question other people, those people that you read, you know, and do you really think it comes to a point where, in actual fact, it's got nothing to do with you whatsoever? Okay.
Oh well, none of that has, because the only thing that's
but not
important
even to
is
judge
me.
them or even to make a comment about them. Okay.
No.
Absolutely nothing. Okay. And even to pose the question. I mean, historically, you and I used to do a lot of that questioning. I find now I absolutely don't. You know, it is what it is. Okay?
I think the question was not so much about them, but a question to myself, because it's a continuation of this theme of what does it mean to be authentic for me?
For me, yeah. Yes. And you can use that as a sort of a sounding board or a reflection board.
Yeah. So if I perceive this to be that, what does that mean for me?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And that can quickly, if you're not careful, which I think again is potentially a trap, is even when you're asking yourself, well, you know, who am I really? You know, who's making that observation? Who's making that judgment? You need to be careful that you don't step outside of what's happening now.
Yeah. Yes.
In pursuit of some abstract, you know. So
Yeah. And it can be as simple, because one of the things that has just casually been on my mind is the word love. Okay. And what is it to love? Okay, or how do you love an animal, or a plant, or a person, and then still come up with the same definition of love?
Well, it's sort of funny you raised that question, actually, because there was a very similar sort of question on that forum that the gratefulness forum
Yes,
that I tend to look at every day.
Yeah.
And they talked about, like, how does love show up or something when you're grateful? I don't know. It was actually people who challenge you, meaning difficult people. What does that mean in terms of love for you? And my immediate sort of response was, well, love could show up as forgiveness. It could show up as being compassionate. It could show up as being boundary setting. It could show up as being self-reflection. It could show up as
a
whole lot of ways that it could show up as, So.
Yeah. So there really isn't a definition.
I don't think there is, in the sense that, my sense of it is that you have to be careful that when you talk about love, that it doesn't become, like this sort of gooey niceness and everything's going to be okay, and because I mean there is an idea. I mean, some people call it like tough love, but I mean, if someone's behaving badly to you, I mean, I think a loving act can be to set boundaries.
Yeah, agreed.
That behaviour is not okay, so I won't accept it. Or, I think that's an act of love.
Yeah. Okay. So you've categorized it as into that category as an act of life. Yeah.
But it's a good question to ask, though, because where do you start?
Yeah, you see, I think we started back, in the environment in which we were born into. So
yeah,
you see, and then there were certain definitions around the word love, or you grew up with, come, give your dad a love, okay. What does that mean? Give him a hug, and then you grew into your teenage years, and you couldn't do without that girlfriend, okay.
Well, I mean, last week you sort of posed a question about, like someone who his life trajectory takes you in a different direction. Where does love play in that?
Yeah. Is it? But then you ask yourself, okay, is that my definition of love, or is it rather something else? Is it some sort of feeling that is drawn by physical attraction?
Well, it could be that. Although the thing is that, is it a straying into the past, or a ricochet into the future about what could have been? Or is it just here and now and say, well, what is it as it is?
Yeah. It's for that same reason that I really, having gone back now to reading science fiction, particularly the whole Star Trek series, okay, and there's new books on that coming out every year. And the one I'm reading now is in a sense pretty advanced with the imagination of science fiction, and I really like that, because it allows me just to ponder things about not necessarily quantum reality, but but just how far do we go with it all being real but energy, and how much can I actually imagine, or am I totally limited in my imagination because of the environment in which I live, okay, that I can't actually think to this level of science fiction that is way beyond anything I could have dreamt up, okay. And so then I just sit and I just think about it, and more you realize just how important just the now is, okay? Your altitude in the now, okay? That's it, okay? Yeah, it's, I don't know, I just find the thinking, I do a lot of contemplating, since I've been drinking more green juice, okay? And somehow the thinking has moved to another level.
I agree with you. I feel I have the same experience.
Okay, that's so fascinating. Yeah, and so you could almost couple, from my perspective, you must couple my science fiction stretching of the imagination into an understanding linked to the body opening up new avenues through the nutrients that it's now able to get from the green juice or the smoothie. Okay, so there's a link there somewhere that is opening areas within this quantum dimension, which is your body, okay, and that highly nutritious juice been able to get into where it never could get into before. Okay, it's like Star Trek going where no man's gone before. Okay, and so the green juice is going where it's never gone before. So yeah.
So when you think about people like Einstein, for example, when he came up with a lot of those different theories or mathematical equations, I guess they essentially were, weren't they?
Yes, right.
I mean, it's sort of interesting to ponder, like, the possibilities of being human, isn't it?
Of being human. I like that phrase. I thought you were going to say of being part of the quantum. Okay.
Well, one of the same, perhaps.
Yeah, because I mean, he definitely. Well, I don't know what stimulated him. I don't know what took him into beyond where people have gone before. But it definitely did. Okay, whatever he was doing, and well, now we're back to that word "doing," because what he was doing, he was a scientist. Okay, and so he was focusing on his doing. Remember, we said he could do anything. He was doing a scientist, if you allow for the poor English, and he came up with there's really incredible things that just weren't in the consciousness or in the altitude of the people of the day, and it really wasn't a very long time ago either.
No, it wasn't. No, it was really quite recent.
Yeah. So what is it? What is it that that stimulated or took Einstein to places? What is it that takes us drinking our green juice to new dimensions. And what does that takes me in reading a science fiction book to, right beyond what I understand as quantum. Okay.
So, like with the science fiction that you're reading, like what are some of the ideas there that have stretched your mind?
Well, I wouldn't easily be able to talk about them because they were in a sense beyond my comprehension. Okay, let me give you an example if I can. Okay, this particular youngster, okay, who was on a Star Trek mothership, and he was like a teenager, and something affected him. Okay, his father was actually the captain of the starship, and his mother was a nurse on the starship, and something happened. There wasn't anything obvious externally, but he found himself sort of pondering and thinking about the time, okay, and then space, okay, and then all of a sudden he was no longer on the spaceship, okay, but he had somebody chasing him, okay, from universe to universe, okay, and the channel was a similar, what we would probably describe now as a black hole, okay, but it wasn't a black hole. It was like an entity, and what was chasing him was inside the entity, okay, and it was able to talk, and eventually, quite near the beginning of the book, he was on this abandoned planet with absolutely nothing other than water. There was water there, but no other life that he was aware of at that time. And this entity opened up through a cliff, and these energy-like life figures, okay, they didn't represent a human figure or something, but they almost like streaks, like snakes that were streaks of light, okay, and they could communicate with him directly in his mind, okay, and he to them, and they were there to kill him, okay, and so he had discovered during this process of wandering the universe that he had certain natural powers, almost like a starship would have a shield around it to stop being bombarded by cannons and things like that, that he could create that around him. And so these entities couldn't actually enter him. And that if he produced his hands in a certain manner, that same energy that was protecting him could now push the others away and freeze them. Okay, not kill, nothing. It never killed anything, but it totally protected him. Okay, and then out of the whole would come, or did come, a human form, okay, but clearly wasn't human, okay, but he was holding on to this, let's call it black hole, okay. So he was getting substance from the black hole to remain in the presence of this youngster, okay, and And so they had a conversation that was like bizarre, okay, and I won't go there. Sort of giving you a picture, but then he the youngster started walking towards the hole, okay, and as he did that, everything disappeared back into the hole, including the energy that he had around him, okay, and then this entity or black hole exploded, totally and utterly gone. Okay, and he knew at that moment he was now free of anybody chasing him, okay, and trying to kill him. Okay, now let's just stop there. I mean, I could carry on with it, but let's just stop there. Everything I've told you leads me to stop for a minute and to think, what does it represent in my life? Okay, and how can I think? And so that's the example that I've given you. And to me, profound. Okay, but I guess somebody else listening to this conversation would say madness. I don't know, but
well, I don't know that it is.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah. So that's what I get out of the science fiction. It's the chance to just contemplate what does it mean in that person's environment, in mine. Okay, do I have that power to hold out my hands and stop anything coming at me?
Kind of reminds me like of like the biblical parables, like the camel going through the eye of a needle and those sorts of ideas, doesn't it? So
tell me more. What you
well,
think?
I don't know. I'm just saying they.
Oh, I see. Okay,
in that sense, have like science fiction characteristics about the story, don't they?
Yeah. And Moses on the mountain,
and even like the Zen koans, like the impossible questions, So
and the burning bush, and was it Peter? Was it going to Damascus and he's suddenly transformed?
Okay. And even resurrection itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think of those energies, and I think, okay, now this author is doing it in science fiction, but how does that information? He's telling me that I've got that power of that youngster, okay, and how do I? And do I want to manifest it? Is it part of my evolution? Is it part of raising my altitude? I just assume yes, okay. And I think it's like, the universe leading me in a certain direction of knowledge in order to become more or closer to the divinity. So, yeah. So I'm looking forward to continuing the book to see.
That's fascinating. Yeah, no, that's really.
Yeah.
Really valuable.
Yeah, it is, and only you would understand that. If I had to mention that to any one of my family, and that's why I so enjoy talking to you. We can go beyond.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Go beyond.
Yeah.
So true.
Isn't
that the fundamental message of most religions, isn't it? Is transcend.
Yeah, you you're transcending the mortal mind, aren't you?
And that's sort of interesting because when you contemplate that, like the first question that comes up is, well, why? Why do I need to transcend?
Yeah. Yeah, those damn why questions.
Well, I think they're wonderful.
They
really
are. But they're so frustrating, aren't they?
It's a bit like, I've started listening to, I don't know, just some of that old, what was it, old 1970s music and that. And are you familiar with the band Supertramp?
The band, which one?
Supertramp. Are you familiar with them?
Yes, I do. The name rings a bell. I
Yeah,
can't recall a song. No.
Well, one of their songs is actually called "The Logical Song."
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
and like when you listen to the words, it's like, when I was young, I loved everything and I was engaged with everything and everything was mysterious and fun and all that sort of stuff.
Mm.
And then it's like, then I went to school and then I was told this is the way you need to do things and all these rules that started coming in.
Right.
And as he goes along and then he sort of says, and then this question came up, is like, well, who am I really?
Okay.
It's like appealing to divinity. Well, tell me who I am.
Yeah.
I
So
thought,
it's been the eternal question. Huh?
yeah, well, that's right.
Yeah.
There used to be this scientist, like I must have been like, I don't know, 5 years old or something. There was a scientist who used to have this little program on black and white TV, as it was in those days.
Yes.
And his name was Professor Julius Sumner Miller.
Okay.
And his favourite question, like, because he always talked about doing little, physics experiments and stuff like that.
Mm.
And his favourite term was, "Why is it so?"
So you were exposed to that word at
Like,
5 years
why
old.
is it so? When you boil the water and it turns into steam. Now, why is that so?
Yeah. That would have been a really good upbringing, being exposed to those sort of things. But you're younger than me. At 5 years old, we didn't have television, let alone black and white.
But even just the idea of that question, it's just that like eternal curiosity, isn't it?
Yes. And it's there for a purpose. I don't know what it stimulates, but it's there for a purpose. Okay. And I think it just takes us and brings us new information.
So do you think
it's new information? Yeah.
So do you think it's something that's unique to humans?
Yeah, I think it is. Okay, I think it is. You see, I think human is just at the moment, or what we are only aware of, the ultimate in evolution. Okay, is the human. So and that is thinking isn't unique to us, but certainly questioning, I think, is unique to us, and even imagining is unique to us. But that doesn't mean there isn't something, an entity beyond us that maybe we'll become at some point. I don't know. I'm not aware, but yeah, maybe we will.
Because even when you look back, just based on what scientists tell us around evolution, like even like the very early humans, like the Neanderthals and there's others, and they sort of said, they tended to be unique, and this sort of strain died out, and this one became dominant, and it's sort of is even interesting in that sort of evolutionary sense as to. It seems to be that the dominant strands were those who perhaps had the best imagination. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or problem solving. Maybe that's the same thing. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think it's the same thing. I think problem solving is working with with existing knowledge, possibly. But there again, Einstein didn't. Yeah, but did he solve a problem? I don't know. He created something. I don't know if there was a problem before that.
Well, I guess the problem that he was solving was a mathematical one, wasn't it? I guess so.
Yeah. To achieve what then?
Well, it was his way of delivering a proof, I guess, wasn't it, of some of those theories? But to deliver a proof, you presumably have to come up with a theory in advance of that.
Yeah, and something that can be tested.
You
know, it's one thing coming up with a formula for gravity, okay, but you know, you've got to put it to,
or relativity, you know.
Or relativity, yeah.
It's interesting, like, you know, when you were talking about the science fiction thing about, you know, the idea of time. So when you leave this planet, because we measure time relative to the sun, don't we?
Yes, we do.
So if you leave the planet and presumably the galaxy, what happens to time?
Yeah. I can sort of, to a degree, I can get my head around that. Okay, because you know you go to sleep and you dream. Okay, and it's you know what
it's a different dimension, isn't it? Yeah.
It is a different dimension. Yeah, it's definitely a different dimension. But you often, depending on your dream and the environment, there isn't time there, and so and you can see yourself and other people in a whole different age spectrum. So yeah, I can somehow, I get a feeling about timelessness. Okay, and you also get a feeling when you, let's say, you get in your motor car and you drive to work, and you get to work and you think, how the hell did I get here? You know, I just left home. Okay, and so that's another sort of indication of what timelessness is like. So that's still an interesting thing to contemplate and to think about. Yeah.
Because it's sort of funny, even when you think about staying here on the planet, you know, that we measure a day, you know, essentially by a rotation of the Earth. Not exactly, but essentially of that, you know.
Yeah.
And we measure a year as a trip around the sun. So,
yeah.
And then you sort of start to think to yourself, well, that's rather arbitrary.
Well, which came first? You see, I think the day with that was there. So let's now take that and do something with it. Okay, we call it a day, and half of it is pitch dark, and half of it is sunlight, and so it was there. So we just gave it some sort of meaning, and the same with the year.
Well, the year would have to be a bit trickier, though, wouldn't it? I suppose it's more about the seasons, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it would be, okay, we're now in summer, and okay, we've left summer. Oh, summer's back. Okay, so we'll call that a year.
Yeah, that's right. Yes,
you know,
a cycle.
A cycle.
Yeah.
Which coincidentally is a trip around the sun.
Yeah.
Or so I believe.
Yeah. But that's also an interesting comment. So I believe, which implies that there are people that don't believe that.
Well, I mean, I say it so I believe because I actually don't know.
Yeah. But you can observe.
Yeah.
But part of scientific evidence is observation.
But I have for me personally, I have no way of having a point on the sun that I'll see in 12 months' time.
I know. No. Yeah. True.
And even when you think about the language we use, oh, it's been a long winter, you know, or it's been like an inference of time around our experience with something.
Yeah.
You know,
or something is spontaneous.
Well, that's right. I'm sitting in the dentist waiting room, and it seems like I've been sitting here for an eternity.
Yes. Right.
Or I go and do something, and I go on holidays, and those 3 weeks disappeared like that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. All relative to time. Yeah. So, but that does give us a feeling, though, that there could easily be a place which is timeless. It does for me. Okay. Where and what it is, I don't know, but I can understand that, in a three-dimensional world, because we live in it, we can understand it, and we can see why we've analyzed it the way we've just done now. But that sort of implies to me that in the fourth, fifth, and sixth dimensions, there must be something that we can't conceive at this stage.
But it also has me questioning even there's 3 dimensions, like even from a self perspective, because I guess, we sort of condition ourselves a little bit and we think, oh, well, my life started there as a baby and over X number of years, it's got me to here. But am I the same person today that I was yesterday? And perhaps not.
Yeah. 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 Is it easier to conceive what a two-dimensional world is like, or living in a two-dimensional world?
No, I can't imagine that. Carl Sagan has that description about flatland. Have you ever read?
No.
Do you know who Carl Sagan is?
No.
He's a US astrophysicist, I guess.
Okay.
And he wrote this book called Cosmos. And interestingly,
I'm familiar with the name. Yeah.
Interestingly, he also wrote a number of science fiction novels.
Oh, did he? Okay. Did you read any of them?
Yeah, I was an avid reader of his stuff when I was a teenager.
Okay.
But he had a TV series at one point just called Cosmos, and he would just talk about, science's understanding of where it was at, and he talked about time and relativity and that. And one of the examples he gave was living in flatland, and that it was only two-dimensional. And like, as your comment about, I can't imagine what this other dimension might look like. And so he has this little exercise where he says, oh, well, I've got this apple, which is a three-dimensional thing, and it decides to visit flatland, which is only two-dimensional. And Michael, who lives in flatland, can only perceive things in 2 dimensions. So when this three-dimensional thing comes into flatland, all it starts out as a dot, and then turns into like a circular sort of shape, and then goes back down to a dot. It's like, what on earth is that?
Okay, I thought you were going to say it'll be a picture, because then that would be two-dimensional. Okay.
No, it was just.
Okay.
It was literally like taking a plane.
Okay.
Because that's all the two-dimensional person could perceive was 2 dimensions.
It's two-dimensional, sure. There's up and there's flat. Yeah, but it's all flat. Whichever way we look at it, it's still all flat.
You know, so
Yeah.
There's so much we don't know, that's for sure.
I think there's so much we know.
Well, there is, I suppose. Yes.
Hey, come on. Hey, don't underplay us.
But the interesting thing though is, like, with that experience though, is if you say I don't know, then that brings an openness.
You don't think it brings a closeness?
No, I think it brings an openness.
You don't make it a fact, and your mental capacity is now closed off that door of possibilities.
The opposite. The opposite.
Okay.
It's like, oh, you know, why is it so? And I wonder, and what if? And
yeah,
all of those things start to run away.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
So like, to use the flatland example, I wonder what a four-dimensional object would look like in a three-dimensional environment.
Okay.
Difficult for us to imagine, isn't it?
A square. Okay. Except you can see all four sides at the same time.
At the same time,
Yeah.
Depends who's looking, I guess.
Yeah, maybe it's got to do with looking. You know, maybe that's part of the different dimensions. Is the looking aspect.
Like in a similar vein, you know, Douglas Harding, you know, who talks about that concept of headlessness, you know, the man with no head.
Yeah.
And he says, you know, so you're sitting in the front seat of a car, watching the countryside go past you. So who's moving? Is it me or the countryside? Am I in fact stationary? And the countryside is actually moving past me.
Who is seeing? Yeah.
And in that context, it's, I don't know if you've ever had the experience yourself, like your own direct experience, is you're sitting in a train at a railway station, and another train pulls up beside you at the station, and you don't look at the platform, for example, on your right hand side. You look at the train which is sitting beside you.
That's right.
And all of a sudden it starts moving. Now who's moving?
Who's moving? You're convinced you are moving.
But then it goes and you're still sitting there at the platform.
Yeah, reality.
But as far as your mind is concerned, is I'm moving.
Yeah, yes. But now you know what's real here at the moment, and particularly, well, in all first world countries, including Australia, you know, you've got holographic images. Okay, so with a holographic image, you can see the minutest detail, and you can walk around it, under it, over it. Okay, you're talking about.
It's like wearing one of those virtual reality masks, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, it's similar, but it's more real because you don't need any artificial sight. You've seen it with your own eyes, and yes, science tells you it's light, and your feeling tells you you can't feel anything. Okay, but there it is, solid as hell. Okay, so I think that also allows you to stretch your imagination and say, that's light, and that's in our dimension. Okay, can we take that into another dimension and have the entire dimension? That, as you say, with the goggles on, you can go into the metaverse. And
I know that like some years ago, I was exposed to a sort of a technology. There was a military technology that they were trying to commercialize.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it, and it was really about virtual reality. So what they would do is they would build these virtual scenarios, and in the room that I saw, it was just like these massive screens up on the walls, and they would just play out scenarios, you know, and so the generals or the war commanders, whoever, would say, okay, that ship over there is about to be attacked by a submarine. Take me over there, and let's have a look at what's unfolding there. And now there's fast jets coming from over here, so take me over there and show me what the perspective is there. Take me over here. So it was a real sort of, you know.
Absolutely, and it's so interesting that you mention that, because I've just in October this month have written some copy for a company called Axiom that produces for the military and other places, but for the military I wrote about, holographic imagery for training. Okay, for exactly what you said. I actually did that now this month. So it was really interesting researching that. And because it's almost, for me, with researching, there isn't, it's like going where nobody else has been. So I can't draw on research to, you know, to that degree, to come up with something that they've come up with now. So I've got to get into their brain and get stuff out. That's where I research. So really very interesting. And I'm busy writing one now for the same company for museums. Okay. And yeah, you have virtual reality displays in holographic form. Okay. And in fact, it has so many benefits, because you can take what's in the storeroom where there isn't place to display in the museum. Okay, there's always stuff in the storeroom they can't display. Okay, and now you can display it holographically. Okay, so there's great benefit, but also now you get a really true feel of what a dinosaur was. Okay, and looked like and moved, and you know, just. So it's fascinating that you mentioned that. Yeah.
So it's sort of like the creation of these images or animations, usually based on scientific findings, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah. And the interesting thing with holographic technology, which I'm convinced from my research, it's in its absolute infancy of what can be done. Because, I mean, what you can do now, and they have done it already, is take 3 politicians from 3 different countries around the world and have them on a stage where none of the 3 are actually on that stage, but they're having a conversation, talking in front of an audience. Okay. And it's not sort of like ghostly or something, you know. You can see the clothes they're wearing and the suits they're wearing, and you know, fascinating where that's going to lead to. Now, that's another thing that I can sort of think about, and from a science fiction point of view, say, this is the start of something. Okay, what is it going to be like in 100 years' time? Okay, this particular technology, where is it leading us?
They're really good questions, aren't they?
Yes, they're exciting though. Yeah, it makes life worth living.
And to come back to the energy that you described in the science fiction book, is, you know, it's almost like, what's the intention of that energy? Is it to kill, or is it to do something else? You know?
Or is that energy just an extrusion of you? Okay. So it's we know that you cannot destroy energy. Okay, science has shown us that. Okay, you can only transform it. Okay, you can't destroy it. So maybe he's drawing some of that cellular energy into some sort of focus and pinpoint. Okay, and so the more you do it, the more powerful it becomes. Okay, and I guess you're always back to choices after that. Yeah,
very much so.
yeah.
Fascinating.
Absolutely.
Well, we should probably leave it there, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I guess so. Hey. Reluctantly so. I think
so you can go and contemplate some more.
Yeah, I will. Now I give myself a time, and I enjoy that time. Okay, well.
Okay then. Lovely talking to you tonight.
Yeah, great. Likewise. And you go and do some writing now.
I will. Okay.
All right. Cheers.
Take care. See you now.
Okay, bye.
Bye.